Hello, everyone. This is the 2nd of July. You are in the gathering, home of the Heal the Earth Initiative in the Beacon Library. And we have Wisdom Keeper Gail Thomas with us, and she is going to be doing whatever she's going to do. Come on in, Gail.
Thank you, Shonda. Well, I'm going to be doing something with this tarot card you drew about New Dawn at the spur of the moment. And I was hoping to do the myth for this full moon. So I'm going to balance by bringing in old ways for new times and a new dawn that brings these together in balance. So I want to share our myth about the strawberries because we're in the strawberry moon. Still, the full moon in June is the strawberry moon, and it's one of my favorite myths in my ancestral ways. And also I want to ask all of you to reach back to the most ancient myths of your own culture and think about sharing those today, if you would. This myth comes from first man and first woman in the Selagi way. So you know it's really ancient when we reach back that far. And I also want to say that myths are unique to culture. Fairy tales are once upon a time, so they're timeless for all people and all times throughout history. That's what that once upon a time part's about. But myths are very specific to understanding and respecting culture in our unique ways. And that's what culture is. And let's think about it for a minute. You know, the people from the sun came first, the plains people that the Spanish call Anasazi. And then we people of the East Coast came bringing the ways of the moon to create balance. So this is how nature works. Nature seeks balance. Think about that for a minute. Balance in every way brings Mother Earth back into balance that she needs and keeps us being with her here as this wave of humans. So as we reach back, there's room for the myths of all cultures. And I'll encourage you, Shonda, to reach back to Sharon Blackie's work on in her book Women Rise Rooted, where she actually took the Celtic myths back to the times before the patriarchy took the women out of the myths. Now think about that for a moment. And how we can restore balance by returning the women to the myths of the Celtic people after the patriarchy took them out of their myths. That speaks a lot to what is needed these days in our dominance culture as we're able to reach around the world and bring these things back and share them in community in these ways. So it's beautiful that we have this opportunity. And I really want to hear what you guys come up with as the most ancient myths of your own ancestral culture. So if you can get there quickly, we'll share them today. If you need to come in next Tuesday and share them. We might keep this thing going for a while because it's one that I really love. And in that vein, I'll share with you my favorite ancestral Salagi myth about first man and first woman having their first argument. They were so angry that first woman just started walking, and she walked towards the setting sun. And first man thought, oh, she'll come back, she'll come around. I'll just, go in the man cave and wait. And the sun kept sinking further and further below the horizon. So he started to think, well, maybe she won't come back. And she was just so angry. She kept walking, just walking and walking it off, but it wasn't walking off. So she knew she was angry when she walked past the blackberries and the blueberries and all the wild food that sustained first man and first woman and still sustains us today. She walked right on by because she was so angry. And when she reached the point where the sun was about to go down below the horizon, she sniffed in the air a little bit and looked down on the ground and saw those little wild heart-shaped strawberries. And she couldn't resist them, so she sat down on the ground, which is always a good thing to do when we're angry. Touch the earth, reach into the earth for the grounding energy that helps so much. And as she started to eat the wild strawberries, she started also to remember the sweetness in her life with first man. And he got wise enough to come looking for her. And he found her sitting there on the ground as the sun was sinking, eating those wild strawberries. And of course, he joined her. And the message of this story is that when we are in those difficult times, as first man and first woman were, in their anger and in their opposition, their recognition that we are opposites and opposites bring balance. They started together to remember the sweetness of life, of their life together, of their own individual lives, of being first man and first woman here on earth and bringing the ways of the moon. There's so much sweetness in that. So I encourage all of you to remember this myth when you feel that anger arising, or when you're walking off just about anything. You can reach back into your memories, into your heart for the sweetness of life. And so at this time, I would love to invite Becky or Lisa or Shonda. I think Golden Wolf is here. Welcome, Golden Wolf. We've gotten into things a little bit, so I'll tell you where we are. We're looking at the Dragon of the New Dawn on this card, and we're reaching back to the most ancient myths of our own ancestral people and cultures, not somebody else's. We don't want to tell somebody else's story here. We want to tell our very own ancestral myths from as far back as we can reach, and share them together in this way in community so that we can find the old ways for new times and And Becky, you look like you might have something to share with us. Are we lucky enough to hear a myth from you today?
I'm kind of trying because I'm thinking about I have both Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee ancestry, and both of them have the story of Sky Woman, although slightly different. But the story I think is that after the first creation of the world, a great flood came, and the animals all gathered um, on the turtle's back because there was water all around, and like a hole of brightness opened up in the sky, and this woman fell through. And so the geese went up to catch her and bring her down to the turtle's back, and she told them that if they could get her a little bit of earth, she will help them. And all of the animals wanted to try to accomplish this feat. So the loon went down first, and after a long time, his body came up to the surface, and then some of the other diving creatures tried, and they all failed. And then humble little muskrat, or Zhushk in our language, he said, "I'll try." And they kind of were not too hopeful that he'd make it, but he went up, took a deep breath, and jumped off the turtle's back and went down. And they waited a long, long time. And then finally, his little body bobbed up to the surface, and he seemed to be lifeless. But they brought him onto the turtle's back, and in one of his paws was a little bit of mud, just enough for Sky Woman to start and spread all over Turtle's back, and it grew and grew and became Turtle Island. So that's a very short um, summary of how the story goes, but we give credit to that humble little creature for giving us a world, and the turtle for hosting it for us, and Sky Woman, a supernatural being, coming and making that possible. So that's the story I know.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Becky. I love that story of Sky Woman. She's such an inspiration to us all. Does anyone else have their own ancestral myth in mind that they'd like to share?
Well, I think that behind the dominant myth of um, of my people is the story that connects with Creator as Sky Woman, and the matrilineal, which is that, you know, everyone thinks of the first man and woman within the dominant mythology as Adam and Eve, but actually it was Lilith and Adam, first man, first woman, first man, created equal. And she was replaced with the rise of patriarchy and the elimination of the recognition that children come from the womb of the mother. And so for me, it's always about going back to that time and to that order, and first woman, first man. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. That's a very appropriate myth to consider in these times, the equality of man and woman working together as equal partners. I think that's something that's very much needed right now. And Carl Jung said the same thing in his time, that we need to be able to bring man and woman together as equal partners. I think he called them equal cohorts. So yeah, let's reach back and find that gold and bring it forward with the help of our ancestors. Anyone else have their ancestral myths to share?
Well, if you came in late, we're doing ancestral creation stories and myths you want to share.
Sorry, I'm not prepared to share at this moment as I don't have enough insight. I just joined this moment. I couldn't figure it out. But I'll wait,
Take your time.
I'll listen, and then take another turn.
Good. Yeah, that's good.
Thank you.
How
Okay,
about you,
well, yeah, I guess I will. So, I am not of Turtle Island. I am pre-Celtic as far as my creation stories and my past life memory goes. And I am Theon, which is translated to the tribe of Danu, which is the Scottish word for Diana. Diana was pre-Gaia. She was the goddess of the Green Isles. And the tribe of Danu were the mystics, and they were magicians and witches. They were also healers, and they were also holy women. And the creation story was that they came from the stars and disguised themselves in wooden ships and arrived in the midst of the clouds. And they landed in the Black Hills of pre-Celtic Ireland. And they went through a series of wars with the Mullison, which were the I guess the barbaric bear barbaric tribes of the region, and they won 3 wars. And on the 4th war, the Millicents drove the tribe of Danu underground, and which is where they became what we know as the wee folk, what's known as the little people here on Turtle Island. And the wee folk mated with the bird people that had already gone underground and became the Fae, which we know as the fairy folk. And so that's my ancestral myths and creation stories. And I'm quite attached to them. They're very detailed, and I've gotten off into all of the different myths of the point in between, and then when they came back out as what we were speaking of the other day as the unseen, and only being able to communicate with those that understood the language. And the language is gifted, the Fey language is gifted. And if you are gifted with the Fey language, you can see them. They will enter your dimension and you will see them. And that's something that we got in a conversation with Claudia, because she's into the Fae. And, I've mentioned that the Fae have told me that there's a big misconception here on Turtle Island that they came here with the Irish after the tobacco famine. And they did not. Their myths and stories did in their books. And I know Claudia, I've gotten to know since I've recognized Claudia as being gifted with a language. So they communicate with Claudia. They are here, but they only are here to those that speak the language. And that is because the myths and stories were abused. And it's And a lot of that actually started in Germany with the Hans brothers and the Gretel stories, Hans and Gretel. They came over here and they when they ran out of fairy tales, they started bringing the Irish tales in with it. And then all of a sudden, the Fey folk were in the, in the ringing cedars and everything else, So, but it's a beautiful, a beautiful, and I have distinct memories of my time spent with them, and I also know that the Millicent, when we lost the Fourth War and were sent underground, the Millicent changed the myth story in a form of colonization itself, that we had actually arrived by the seas and carried our boats up the mountain in the nighttime, and that the mist that we had arrived in from the stars was actually smoke that we had burnt our ships to keep them from being found. So that's the documented stories that you will hear, that the tribe of Danu arrived by sea, carried their boats their wooden boats up the mountains and burned them. And that's because they appeared out of the smoke of the mountains to the tribes below. And so that's how it was all changed. But when they first appeared, they were honored as mystical, magical people, because it was a mist in which they had appeared, much like the stories of Avalon and
Mm.
the tales of the I can't remember her name. And they brought three treasures, and they gifted them to the Celtics. One was the sword of destiny, which later became known as Excalibur, and the great cauldron. I can't properly say the name of that in the old, because it's not Celtic. It's another language, and I've studied that language, but I have problems with English, so I have natural problems with other languages because of this tweak I have in my speech. So, but it translates into the Great Cauldron, and it was a magical soup pot, a pot of soup that fed the people. And then the other end was the Stone of Destiny, and we've all heard of the Stone of Destiny, that evolved out into the Sorcerer's Stone and all such as that, alchemy and such. So that's my stories.
Beautiful. Thank you, Shonda.
Uh,
That's a very
can
sweet
I?
story. Please, yes, Lord.
Can I? Can I?
Yes, yes.
So hi, I I live on Turtle Island for over three-quarters of my life. That would be about 34 years, but I originally come from Poland, Europe. And our history dates back 1450 years. And we, very much like the ancestors of Turtle Island, we used to live according to the 13 moons, to the elements of earth, fire, wind, water. We had mystical creatures on our emblems, on our shields and flags. Half, actually, I'll show you one because I have a painting here from a Ukrainian friend, and we're neighbors. Like this
Nice.
one here. See, half human, half animal. We had a lot of those legends. Um,
Oh,
Predating back to the ninth century, where we had legends of dragons, like the Babel dragon that was defeated by a hero back then. But we used to live off the land, were guided by the stars, like everyone was tribal people at one point or another. And then back in the ninth century, there was the Lek, the Prus, and the Czech, and the three of them were guided by each animals. We were guided by the Polish white eagle, which we have white eagles in Poland, and that's always been our national bird, always on our flag, white eagle. And each one of them went on their different paths with these animals as their guides, as the legend says. And that's how these countries became Poland, Russia, Czech Republic, and Prussia. Um, and we first became a country in 994, and we still lived off the land. We had tribal settlements and a lot of this mystical creature legends. We were pagans and heretics, and we were overran by the Western Crusaders, you know, of course by the Crown Crusaders and the Vatican Crusaders, Roman, with the Christian crosses on their emblems, black or red, I remember. And we fought many, many wars over 450 years. We had an army in the 1500s that was unbeaten for 200 years, horseback, you know, with, with spears, and they had wings, with these big wings, with feathers from eagles attached to them, as it made them ride faster. They were unbeaten for 200 years. We're one of the 5 countries in the world that never invaded anyone. I am happy to say that we were taken off the map 3 times by Russians, Austrians, and Germans in a 3 treaty attack on us. And we always took our lands back, but we never invaded anyone. We're never colonialists. But the Christian Crusaders ran us over eventually, and we ended up being kings. Part of my family were dukes, to come from a royal family. We have an emblem and rings and all that in history. But now 99% is Christian, you know, and we did end up being run over by the Catholics, Christians, the Vatican, the Crown, and the Crusaders. And that is the backstory. And I ended up in Canada running from the Soviet communist regime. And my people actually from Poland started migrating onto Turtle Island, the States, and Canada in when the First World War broke out, actually. And ever since then, you have a lot of Polish and Ukrainian farmers all over Turtle Island. And the most populated Polish city outside of our capital, Warsaw, is Chicago, actually. So that's my story back now. I'm on the North Vancouver Islands of British Columbia in Canada, and studying the ways for a long time to be a Halloween peacemaker. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's wonderful to hear everyone's ancestral stories and feel, you can almost feel a difference in your body when we reach back and honor our ancestors in these ways with their stories, their myths, way back at the beginning of this wave of humans, where we all can share ancestors. And Connie, you just joined us. I'll extend our invitation. We've each shared one of our ancestral myths, our own ancestry, and the oldest myth that we can reach back and find in our memories, and acknowledging and honoring that myth is very specific to culture and to ancestors, and to honoring them. And we invite you, if you would like to join us in sharing a myth from your own ancestral culture.
Whoa, well, thank you, Gail. Wonderful to see you. You look lovely. I love your whole setup there. You're really beautiful, expressing you in a beautiful way. Yeah, very interesting that you would ask me that, because I have an ancestral mandate from my ancestors who were in fact Mayflower pilgrims. And it is very interesting because I'm very connected to the indigenous understanding of the nature of the universe in native ways from decades of time with visionary native elders, Wallace Black Elk being one of them, whom I think you perhaps have known. And I saw the similarities between what the Mayflower Pilgrims, who weren't the Puritans, they were a very specific bunch of people. They were called the Separatists because they put their lives on the line to separate from the Church of England in the 1600s, late 1500s, 1600s. And what they knew was that it was our right to respond to our direct connection to the divine within us, to the divinity, to all that is. And they championed freedom of conscience. That was their vision, that there could be a way of being on earth that was directed by freedom of conscience. And they had to escape England because it was against the law not to go to the Church of England. It was treasonous. So they were jailed. They were moms, dads, kids, pastors in the church, etc., who had this understanding and this knowing. They saw it from actually reading the Bible when it was translated into English, and mass produced. It was on everybody's table, and they studied it, and they went, wait a minute, we're intended to relate directly, not through a church. Okay. And what I saw was the similarities with the Native Americans and the indigenous peoples of the world. So they came, ultimately, they fled to the Netherlands, where there was freedom of religion. And they were there for 12 years, and they realized they had to move on because their children were becoming Dutch. They had this vision for humanity. So they came to the New World and landed in Plymouth, Massachusetts, what we call now Plymouth. And they lived in peace and friendship for 54 years with the native people there. They encountered a visionary native leader, the Massasoit of the Pokanoket people. And he was, I say, because I'm into frequency, okay? We've written a book called The Trust Frequency, 10 Assumptions for a New Paradigm. And what I say is that they were in a similar frequency. This leader, this Massasoit, was a very kind man. And there's the source material where I've read this stuff. Okay, so I can refer to source material to show that the Massasoit, Osamequin, which means yellow feather, was an extraordinary leader in a high vibration. Okay, so how I pose it is that these two groups met and lived in peace and friendship as long as the Massasoit lived, and others, many others, came to New England, Connecticut, New York, and all that. The Puritans came in 10 years later in 1630, and many others. So the pressure for land, the whole thing disintegrated after this generations. But what's important is, for me, that we are in the process of going there, to that place that the indigenous peoples are carrying for us in their knowing and way of life that's intrinsic to their cosmology. I feel we've all been affected by a lower vibration, all races. So the native people had wars with each other. They did stuff long before the white man came that was in a lower vibration. And so all of humanity had been responding to that lower vibration. That's how I phrase it. So there's no shame, no blame to anybody, any color, for any of the stuff we did to each other and to ourselves, to our own people, to each other. And that now it's time, the frequency has risen. We're being pulled forward into a new way of being. And what the native people are carrying in their connection to the sacredness and oneness of all life is now coming forth. And And it's very exciting because I saw this 30 years ago, that this was the next step in the evolution of humanity, was what the indigenous peoples are carrying. So I've been doing a lot of work on the spiritual founding of the United States to show this frequency, this spiritual beginnings of this nation. It's been trashed. That period of time has been trashed by revisionist history. But this ancestral mandate of my ancestors, which is what you asked, you know, is key for this country, this nation, to access the true beginnings, the spiritual beginnings, the higher frequency of these beginnings with the Native Americans and the role they've played in the evolution of this nation, of the American mind, spirit, and democracy. So that's what I can say about my ancestors and my
Yeah, Connie, thank
yeah.
you. Thank you. Is there a myth that they brought with them that reaches way back into their own ancestral story? You know, myths are very specific to culture, and myths are generally different from history and different from fairy tales, and you know, carrying really great wisdom in the spiritual traditions of symbol and image. Our myths go far beyond where history goes and where linear thinking goes and dominance culture goes. So I encourage you to watch the video after we get it posted on YouTube and see the myths that preceded you, and if you know, a very ancient myth of your people comes to mind. It's, I don't know how much time we have left, maybe not a lot, but if you do have, you know, something more in the realm of myth that you'd like to share, or I think Kayla has joined us. If anyone else has a myth, an ancestral myth of their own lineage that they'd like to share at this time, we got maybe 15 minutes more to share in this way.
Blessings to all.
Thank you, Connie.
Thank you, Connie. And that was a very interesting history lesson. Thank you for that. Caleb, did you like to hang on, guys? Would you like to come in and share a myth before we move on? We've got almost at the top of the hour, we've got the kinship way coming up. Kayla, can you hear us?
Okay,
By the
we'll
way,
come back.
a new day
There.
dawns. This is our theme for today, in case you are wondering what this card is up here.
The dragon, yeah, the dragon of the myth. Yeah, Kayla, we hear you now. Would you like to share an ancient story of your ancestors, a myth of your culture with us?
So I'm kind of coming in during work. I just saw the Zoom link posted and my first time being involved here. I added myself to the Kinship Way and wanted to learn more. And so I thought I'd jump on. So I can't take too much time because I'm unfortunately still at work, but I'm really interested to hear more and to learn more. I think the only thing I can immediately come up with that I have time to share is that I'm from Mushkegowuk Cree territory. So think of polar bears and northern lights in northern Ontario, Canada. And so the word Cree, actually, we have no letter R or sound of R in our language. So the word Cree, Cree, isn't even a good so we call ourselves Mushkegowuk, people from the swamp. But there's a whole group of people, including my own people, that call ourselves Cree, although we don't make that sound at all. And so that's been something to unwrap, and we're still unwrapping in our own community about what that history means. And some of that history looks like when it said Christian residential education. And that's interesting that a whole group of people consider themselves Cree traditional people, even though it's actually Christian residential education is what that word means. And so like that's a huge myth that we're called Cree. And so that's been something for me that I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And you bring up an important point. Cherokee also contains an R, and we don't have that sound in our
Mhm.
language. So back again, that's why I'm encouraging everyone to reach way back to the beginning of this wave of humans where we all share ancestors, because our ancestors came in the spiritual ways of uniting the three worlds. This is the world tree in every culture, the myth of the world tree, and so many myths combine that lower realm, you know, Shonda's fairies and fae that went into the lower world, and you can hear it all across our stories. You know, the commonality that we share is of the three worlds, and we are here on earth to be a bridge between the lower world and the higher world. Okay, the lower world where the power animals sit and the unseen helpers are there to help us as we connect with the higher realm where the teachers and the ancestors who've done their work, who've attained the wholeness that we want to ask to help us do our work. And in doing so, we facilitate the connection between the lower world and the higher world from this middle realm where we only work with the elements, the earth, air, fire, and water. And the darkness that is in our world today is from misunderstandings arising from losing these myths and these cultural images and symbols and meaning and purpose in our lives. And when we reach out in desperation and survival, which also comes up in many of our myths that we've heard today, we open to the dark realm if we don't do that in a deep understanding of working only with those who have done their work in the higher realms. And when we open to that ancestral realm that you know is only those who've done their work, we avoid the darkness of the astral realm that encircles Mother Earth. And this is where the disembodied spirits and the beings that we begin to have access to in our traditional medicine ways, and also in the current culture medicine ways that are being brought to this country from the Amazon forest and the plant medicine. This is not, you know, creative things of the ego mind. This is not seeing what is in the little ego mind. It's seeing the other dimensions. And when that preparation for working with the other dimensions doesn't come with the plant medicine, then that's where the confusion is created, and these dark entities become uninvited into our lives. And I encourage you all to listen to Trisha Ann Davis when she talks about that people don't have the ability to take life, and only even their own life, and only do that when they are possessed by these dark entities or these disembodied spirits who are not able to do the work that they came here to the middle realm to do.
Mhm.
So it's been beautiful to share with all of you today in these ways. And I would love for us to come back, you know, on Tuesdays coming forward as far as we can, and bring our myths forward, you know, come from our creation myths to the next myth that we are aware of, or that we can actually have the resources now to go looking for. You know, there are many resources that were not available that now we have access to. So let's find our own individual ancestral myths and honor our ancestors in this way going forward on these Tuesday gatherings, and see what we can learn that is helpful for the collective times that we are in right now. And so let's sing our gratitude together to these ancestors who bring us these symbols and images and meaning and purpose in our life, and these myths that we can reach back to for individual cultural support. So let's sing our gratitude to them very quickly and hold that love and gratitude for each other, to each other in our heart. So join me in singing. Unmute and let's raise our voices in the frequency way. Ancestors, grandmother, we share compassion. My relation, grandmother,
Water is life.
we are grateful.
Love,
so much, and I thank the spring here on the south end of my steward land on our sacred mountain for bringing that song to me in the Lakota language, because we held the Nipikaga ceremonies here for over 13 years. The water gifted us that song to share our love and gratitude around the world. So thank you all for participating in that and in these ways. And I hope to see you next Tuesday with more myths from your own ancestors to honor them. Thank you all.
And Wado, thank you, sister, so
you.
much. And as tradition in the gathering, we close the recording. We said thank you to the energy in the room, and thank you to Wisdom Keeper Gail Thomas. And our theme for today, a new dawn rising.